So 2.3b, and we're on page 205 in the college algebra book using the quadratic formula. Jump to page 206, and it shows you how that formula was developed from that using completing the square. So anyway, that's all the quadratic formula is basically completing the square without having to do all of the completing the square work. So it works for any quadratic equation or function, and middle of page or bottom of page 206 gives you your x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. A lot of people will make a mistake and just put the 2a under the b squared minus 4ac. It's under the entire thing there. And they give you some examples as far as solving the quadratic or using the quadratic equation to solve a problem. And I'm not going to do example 5. You can follow there. You're just plugging in numbers for your a, b, and c and getting the answer there. And I do want to do x squared plus 5x plus 8 real quick, just because we end up with an imaginary number and it's kind of good to have a little bit of practice with that. So I'm just going to put in the numbers here. 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times 8 all over 2 times 1. Alright, so we end up with our negative 5, and everything inside there becomes a square root of negative 7, and that's over 2. So we end up with negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 7i over 2 for our answer. The solutions, as far as where this crosses the x-axis, is negative 5 plus the square root of 7i, and we'll put that over 2 and that over 2 because it is imaginary, so it's got to be in the a plus bi format, which means the next answer is negative 5 halves minus the square root of 7i over 2. So those are my two answers where it crosses the x-axis. Alright, which brings us on page 208 to the discriminant, and you've had a little bit of knowledge on the discriminant before. When we use the equation or x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. The discriminant is this part right there without the square root. It's just the b squared minus 4ac. And one of the main reasons we use the discriminant is to determine what kind of answer we're going to get in our problem. So if we get a discriminant, if we put our numbers in here for a, b, and c, and we get 0 for our answer, we get one real number solution. If we get 2, or if we get a number greater than 0, so if this discriminant is bigger than 0, we get 2 real number solutions. If our number is less than 0, or if we get a square root of a negative 3, we get a negative radical, we get 2 complex or 2 imaginary solutions. Okay, so those are your options there. Middle of page 208 gives you a little purple box with what's going on there. So, Some equations can be treated like quadratics even though they may not be quadratic, and we've done these before. Hopefully you remember a little bit how to do this. So if we have something like that, and if we choose to make u equal to x squared, then we can substitute u in there and make it into a quadratic equation. So we can do u, which is going to be actually let me show you a little more detail here before we just jump into it. So if u equals x squared, we can actually make this right, and then here I'm going to put a u in its place, and here I'm going to put a u in its place. And then I can use my, I'm just use factoring. It's a pretty simple problem here. I've got a 4 and a 1 and a minus and a minus. So my u is going to equal 4, or it's going to equal 1. Okay? But I can't stop there because I haven't found out what x is. So if u is 4, and if x squared equals u, x squared equals 4, or x squared equals 1. So x equals plus or minus the square root of 4, which is 2, or x equals plus or minus the square root of 1, which is 1. So I actually have 4 answers. Plus or minus 2, plus or minus 1, which goes along with that right there, telling me how many answers I'm going to get. Okay, so just something to remember as far as trying to make an equation reducible by using the quadratic form, or the quadratic method, by setting the x squared equal to u, and then you can end up plugging it in, making life a lot easier. So we're going to call that good for section 2.3. So 2 videos, 2.3a, 2.3b, and we are done.